Now, let's get back to our federal budget coverage now. Let's bring in former Victorian Liberal Party President Michael Kroger and Labor MP Josh Burns. Thank you both very much for your time this evening. Michael Kroger, first to you. What's your takeout, what's your analysis of the budget handed down by Treasurer Jim Chalmers last night?
Well, he's spending like a drunken sailor. So you know, expenditure to GDP next year gets to 26.6%, the highest in 40 years, putting aside the pandemic. He's got $120 billion worth of deficits coming in the next 4 years, which is why I don't think there'll be another budget before the election. That's before you add the $80 billion off balance sheet that he's spending, which is on capital account, not on the income and expenditure account. Spending is out of control under this government. He can't control his spending. He should be thanking the mining industry for keeping his budget afloat. But this guy's out of his depth. He's out of money. And if you want to know why it's so irresponsible, you just look at the $300, right? These things, of course, they should be means tested, right? People who are well off do not need the $300, but it was all too hard, so he just thought he'd give the money. This is typical Labor. It's all too, just give it to everybody, right? Australia is going backwards under Chalmers. He's not good enough to be Treasurer. He's a B grader, and he's plundering, you know, the revenues to fulfil his insatiable desire to spend money. And, you know, sooner or later, the Prime Minister's got to bring him to heel because, you know, he's damaging the Australian economy. And the final point is this. This is an inflationary budget. If you want to know why, inflation's 3.5%, right? It was 3% in 2007, 3%. The Governor of the Reserve Bank in 2007 said, I'm worried that inflation's getting more than 3%. I've got to increase interest rates, which he did before the election. You know, interest rates then were 6.5%. 6.5%. He increased it to 6.75% just before the election. The gap was 3.5% between the cash rate and and inflation. And so what you've got in Australia now is a situation where the cash rate probably needs to be higher, even though I don't think there'll be 3 rate rises. It needs to be higher to get inflation under control, and Chalmers has done nothing except put oil on the fire.
All right, Josh Burns, let's get your response to that. The main things that Michael Kroger just accused your government of: spending out of control, the $300 energy payment should be means tested, and that the budget is inflationary. Josh Burns.
Well, good evening, Sharri, and good evening, Michael. I mean, full credit to Michael for getting out the talking points. He did it with gusto, but he missed a couple of key facts, one of which is that this is now the second budget in a row where we've delivered a surplus, something that the coalition didn't do despite winning 3 terms of government. They didn't do it under Tony Abbott, they didn't do it under Malcolm Turnbull, and they didn't do it under the previous bloke, Scott Morrison. Jim Chalmers has done it twice. He's proven that he is managing the budget in a fiscally responsible way while also ensuring that across the country, people who are facing the pressures of cost of living get some support, and whether that's done through the redesigned tax cuts, whether it's done through reforming the HEC system, or, you know, I mean, honestly, Sharri, if Michael wants to lead the Liberal Party's charge of talking down lower power prices and a reduction in power prices for Australian families and hardworking Australians, then be my guest. You should never interrupt your opponents when they're making a mistake.
Josh, you told us you'd give us $275 every year.
By all means, you should lead the.
You said $275 every year.
Sure.
And by the way, Josh, Josh, you know full well our mutual friend Josh Frydenberg delivered a budget surplus in 2018-19, but in those days it wasn't considered a surplus because the $8 billion from the Future Fund wasn't included in the budget. It is now. But if it had been included then, he would have delivered on the same rules a $7 billion surplus. So this is all fluff from Jim Chalmers. And the chickens are coming home to roost in the next 4 years. He's leaving us with $120 billion of deficit.